Ah yes, Hungary, my beautiful homeland. Beautiful architecture, breathtaking landscapes, the pearl of the Danube, and of course, who could forget the pedophilic conservative shadow government? Yes, I am that serious, and by the end of this video you will understand what I mean. As some of you might have noticed, Hungary faced a few scandals in the past few weeks in which the President of the Republic, not Orbán, so who cares I guess, pardoned the pedophile and everyone went apeshit. President resigned, previous justice minister resigned, president of the Hungarian Reformed Council, who was a bishop, abdicated. What the hell is going on? Let me explain the horrors that went down to show you the true gut-wrenching horror that happened in the children's home, as well as expand upon the sinister actions and the mafia-like dealings of the current conservative establishment. My goal with this video is to bring a largely only Hungarian story to you. I will mostly use sources and things that were exclusively mentioned in Hungarian media and not that much outside. Warning, the stuff I will talk about is heavy, and if you are the kind of person who might be triggered by it or stuff like that, I have warned you, So what exactly happened? Pedophile scandals are nothing new in the country, especially politically connected pedophile scandals. No, it's not just because the current Swastichristian government is closely connected with several church organizations, but they do tend to be around in a lot of these cases. Anyway, the original case goes back to around 2016. There is a children's home in the city of Bicske. Bicske is not that much of a remarkable place. It has a population of 11,000, and it's an old medieval agricultural settlement with some old ruins from the first era of the Hungarian kingdom. A quiet region of the country, it is also a conservative political stronghold, only a stone toss away from the town of Felcsút, the hometown of Prime Minister Orbán Viktor, and arguably the main seat of power for the Hungarian conservative elite, where the threads of power meet together. Not many positions in these places are handed out to outsiders. Side note, do not be confused, I am using the original Eastern naming order for Hungarian names. This means that the surnames comes first. In 2016, during the third Orbán government, this quiet region was shaken up by horror. A 19-year-old boy named Horváth Szabolcs, a resident of the Bicske Children's Home, a facility established to mainly house kids who have been taken from abusive and dysfunctional households, committed suicide by jumping in front of a train before a scheduled meeting with his counselor. A friend of his, who was also a victim of the children's facility, went to the police a few days later and reported the director, named Vásárhelyi János, for sexually abusing them. I will spare you and myself from all the details in the following account. But you have to know that this launched an avalanche of reports, and a major investigation was launched into the place, which resulted in the conviction of the director for sexually abusing at least 10 children for a prolonged period of time. He started abusing most of them around the age of 11 and 12. This was not the end of the case, however. During the investigation, he was suspended from his position and in the meanwhile took up a place as a PE instructor in an elementary school. While the case was going on, a boy whom he also abused since he was 12 left the institution and also reported him. The now suspended director, through a connection to the only close relative of the boy, his cousin, managed to convince him to come back, upon which he and his vice-director threatened him into signing a false confession, which basically stated that the kid, quote, made up all the allegations because he's a drug addict and he said all those things while on lighter gas. The kid was too afraid to turn to the police because he had a few minor cases and he was afraid of them. Also, he was afraid that, like last time in 2011, nobody will listen to him. This will be something I will talk about a little bit later. The kid's counselor, however, found this out and reported them to the police, which resulted in another investigation, this time for restricting personal liberties and coercion. Both of them were convicted. Now, this was not the first investigation. In 2011, in relation to the same boy who committed suicide, a police report was filed because of the director abusing children. The witnesses were coerced into withdrawing their confessions by the vice-director and the investigation was closed. It was an open secret that Jánosba liked young boys, said one of the victims. The director, Vásárhelyi János, was a well-connected person, and in high places for that matter. He was an honorary citizen of Bicske, had a prestigious award for the protection of children and for which he was cited by Fidesz party members, and he was close personal friends with the Minister of Human Resources, then considered one of the most powerful ministries, Balogh Zoltán, reformed pastor and later bishop, who even cited him for another prestigious award just months before the scandal broke out. Another one of his friends and business partners were Orbán Győző, oligarch and younger brother of Prime Minister Orbán Viktor. He was also a Fidesz-supported candidate in the Bicske district during the 2002 elections, appearing on stage with the great leader himself. The vice director also had friends in high places. His parents were honorary citizens of their village, his father was a high-ranking official in the Reformed Church, and the family frequented a luxury hotel place in Zabula, Transylvania, a favored retreat of the Hungarian political elite, including former President Novák Katalin. During his work in the children's home, he became close with the local members of Fidesz, and alongside the director frequented the Puskás Football Academy, a personal pet project of Prime Minister Orbán Viktor. Both of these men had ties to the conservative political elite and the church. Both engaged in this behavior long before the scandal took place, and both were represented by an attorney closely affiliated with Orbán and his dealings. Every day unearthed a new thread so far. Before we move on to what happened, I also have to establish the environment in which today's scandals happened. As I mentioned before, politically connected pedophile scandals are not new. Another case was back in 2019 when the closely Fidesz-aligned Hungarian ambassador to Peru, Kaleta Gábor, was caught in an FBI dark web operation in which they shut down a major CP distributing site. He was a paying customer and his account was traced back to him. 19,000 pictures were found on his government laptop. The counterterrorism police quietly arrested and brought him home. However, his case was spilled out not long after. His sentence, though, created a public outrage of not before seen proportions. Allegedly, the authorities treated him unusually lightly, and he, the good Christian family man he was, according to his testimony, was given 1 year of probation and a fine of 540,000 forints. Basically nothing. And even after that, he had the goal to appeal the decision at first, which was revoked after a few days because of an even greater public outrage. This was connected to the government and people were angry with Orbán for what happened. He had to do something, and do something he did. He used this case as an excuse for the so-called Child Protection Bill, a bill that we call a salad law, which means that a lot of sometimes unrelated laws were thrown in one basket and passed together. It was nicknamed the homophobe law by everyone with two brain cells to rub together, and you will probably guess now what this was about. Aside from making some minor changes to the pedophile laws, it was mostly a law against LGBTQ people, specifically a censorship law. Government-owned media, so 80% of it basically, spin the whole story into a major attack against the, quote, gender ideology of the West that, quote, corrupts our young. The law, among other things, banned any talk of LGBTQ in school and heavily restricted sex education and put heavy censorship on media they considered having content that deviates from normalcy. Yes, this happened. Not the first and not the last of its kind, this law. And they accuse anyone of being a pedo if they dare criticize it because to them it's the so-called child protection law and why are you against the child protection law? They even created another of these so-called national consultations to justify it. National consultations are another authoritarian invention. In 2014 they realized that they could lose referendums even when they use extremely loaded language and basically give one-answer questions. So they brought in these national consultations in which they send you a bunch of questions in the league of migrants are destroying Europe, do you support more migration? If we give more weapons to Ukraine, the war continues, do you support peace? And gay people are spreading Western gender propaganda in schools and want to change the gender of our children, do you want to protect children? Then when most people ignore these scrap papers and a few answer to the loaded questions, they will proudly proclaim that 98% of the population say no to war, gender propaganda and migration, plastering the whole country with these ugly blue background posters. Anyway, Fidesz, owing both to its own corruption and the pedo scandals and now the new wave of right-wing culture war, started heavily pushing the narrative of protecting children from the evils of Western gender ideologies, whatever these might be, pushed through a bunch of so-called child protection laws, which in reality do nothing to protect children and make it the center of their entire political image and campaign. And then shit hit the fan. So with all this background, what exactly happened? On February 2nd, 2024, an article by one of the last opposition papers came out with the title "Novák Katalin gave pardon to the protector and accomplice of the pedophile director of the Bicske Children's Home." The case happened in early 2023, where the President of the Republic gave pardon to a group of individuals on the note of love and forgiveness because the Pope visited the country. The list was compiled by the then Minister of Justice, Judit Varga. To quickly tell you who the President is, the President here is the head of state. He or she is elected by parliament, and so far all of them were close allies of Orbán, who has a parliamentary supermajority since 2010. They are largely ceremonial and hold not much power. What is relevant though, that they have the authority to unilaterally pardon people without explanation on the recommendation of the Minister of Justice. Who was given pardon was not that public, and most people didn't care about it then, until, and I kid you not, a random attorney and the reader of the paper spotted it in a report nearly a year later. The other interesting guy that I have to mention who was pardoned, who we know about before, was Budaházy György, a fascist terrorist. So when this came out, the outrage was huge. This was indefensible, and everybody across the political aisle was angry. At first, the government media avoided talking about it, then they started saying confused and contradictory statements. Not long after, the president was recalled from a meeting in Qatar and resigned in public TV. Not long after, now former Minister of Justice and list leader of Fidesz in the upcoming EP elections retired from public life. A few days later, another thread revealed that the now president of the Hungarian Reformed Council, Bishop Zoltán Balog, was allegedly behind the whole thing. A friend of both the former director and vice director, he allegedly used his powerful connections to have him pardoned. After this came out, he was called in for a confidence vote in the church. He passed it with 88% of the vote, which prompted several officials to resign, and him eventually leaving the post of president of the council. The guy who was out of prison on a reintegration program, K. Endre, not something commonly afforded to inmates in Hungary by the way, is now without a criminal history and can work with children again, something he would have been banned from. Orbán, who allegedly found out about this on television, which is highly unlikely, and was allegedly furious, probably, but for all the wrong reasons, was caught with his pants down. He scrambled to make a statement, quickly distancing himself from these people. Also sadly for him, his yearly speech was coming up, where he uncharacteristically had to defend himself and the party from the backlash of this whole scandal. He also unveiled the new proposed constitutional amendment that will ban pardons for crimes that were committed against children. He lost two important politicians who helped work on the tarnished image of the country. Several veteran staffers from the presidential palace resigned in protest, and according to his polls, he is bleeding voters by the hundreds of thousands. According to rumors, the story is far from over too. For the moment at least, this is on everyone's lips. While this is going on, we are just standing here, staring into the abyss in disbelief. Connections among people run deep, and now a politically connected criminal was pardoned by a nominally independent arm of state on the suggestion of a bishop closely connected to the government, signed by a government minister. Not the first time something similar happened, and this is just one way how the neo-feudal system of connections and cronyism manifests itself in this country. Call me crazy, but if this is not a literal deep state cabal of pedophilic god worshippers, I don't know what it is. So what now? As much as I want to see the government collapse, there are reasons to be skeptical. First, scandals are nothing new. These things happen, it is more or less accepted practice at this point, and the government more than survived several of these. Their grip on power didn't weaken then, and for now they have kicked out everyone whose name came up, so it will not weaken now, for the foreseeable future that is. Second, their media control is absolute. They are already trying to spin the story and blame it on the opposition, the left and West and everybody else, and this will turn into a tide of new information and fear-mongering to shift the conversation as it happened before multiple times. Third, even with all the evidence and connections, nothing so far links the story directly to Orbán. If it comes out that he know about it, it might break them, but until then, a worse election performance is the best we can hope for. They are also working on fixing the leak, as the court-affiliated magazine where this report originated from was stopped for investigation. Not all doom and gloom, though. This scandal was one of, if not the worst that the government had so far. And because of the already mentioned public environment, it hits especially hard on their voter base. This could eventually grow to be the base for the potential loss in the 2026 parliamentary elections, but those are a long way away. This kind of quick resigning was unheard of, but, well, it's not Orbán yet, so does it even matter? He will sacrifice all of his ministers and his entire party before he caves in. There is a positive side again, that, for example, large-scale protests took place and the whole scandal became a rallying cry against the hypocrisy of the current government, and among other things, calls for the direct election of the president, and the disorganized opposition kind of needs a point to focus on currently. We shall see what the future holds. Another interesting thing that happened was that Magyar Péter, the husband of the former Minister of Justice Varga Judit, has come out and basically started shit-talking the Orbán government, to which he worked for them. He was basically an oligarch, and he basically threw in the towel and said, guys, fuck that, that is not good, and here are a bunch of things that happened. There is a great interview with him on Partizan, which I will link down in the description, and I strongly urge you to watch it. I have to apologize again. This was a quick video I made to cover this topic. It also probably hears that I am currently ill with a sore throat. Regular programming will follow in the next few months. Until then, I was Kane. Take care, everybody, and if you want to see me more, please like, comment, and subscribe. Bye!